We did it. We're live.
Wow.
We're live.
That's a miracle because there was a lot of trouble getting there.
I don't know why. People who watch the show know that I am not good at this at all. But this was worse than usual. This was exemplarily bad. Not great. But we did it, and I'm glad because you're here. And I was in. I said I had to go use the lavatory right before we started just to make sure. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, I might be like this. If this is my first discussion, my first interview at SpringOne 2023, then I might have peaked, right? There's nowhere to go but down at this point. I got Mr. Spring in action, legend in the Java and JVM community, known, I think, mostly for, well, forgive me, but I at least know you from your amazing, amazing book, Spring in Action. I'm sure there's countless others in the show that would have the same experience, but what do you think you're known for? I don't know.
Who are you again?
I don't even know. Just a huge fan. Have you been on the show before? I think you must.
I don't think I have. No.
Really? Oh,
never.
I fail. No, that's not true. Is that true?
No, I'm pretty sure it's true.
Okay, hold on. If that's true, then I have failed. All episodes. Well, that's a bummer. Really? Not even during the whole pandemic?
No.
What a failure I am. Oh, we've talked about it. Really? No, that's this year. What about last year? Hello, look at all these people, by the way, coming into the mix here. So all episodes would go by year. Okay.
You had some great people on here, though.
Then they find out who I am and what I'm doing. They're like, oh, wait, can I cancel? I'm like, no, too late. We're recording. Too late.
Oh, it is too late? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you've actually been on the show. Oh, well, welcome to the show. First time. Right. Hopefully not the last time. I'm super, super honored you're here. I was already honored that you might be here, thinking you had already been here. It just seems like a huge oversight on my part if you haven't already been here. Look at that. We got some people. We got some nice people from around the world. By the way, not a great time in the day for like half the planet right now. And they still showed up. Look, there's people hired from Sweden. I know Simon here. He's in, I think, Belgium. And hello from South Africa. So
wow.
People are just turning up. They're excited to talk to you. And by the way, we see the comments. If you have questions, comments you want to ask, probably your first teacher on Spring and certainly one of mine. He's here in the studio. Well, as it is.
And I'll be happy to Google any answer you need.
Yeah. Good. Well, welcome.
Well, thank you.
We're at SpringOne. This is all the people in the chat, you're missing out. Like, this is a great show.
Yeah, it was an amazing keynote this morning. A lot of energy. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, no spoilers here, but I think there were some interesting announcements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about those?
Let's see. The one thing that stuck in my head, and it's mostly just because I've been intrigued by this lately, is something I still don't know much about because they didn't talk about it much in the keynote, but they hinted to it, is apparently there's this new experimental project called Spring AI.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah. Spring AI, github.com, spring-projects-experimental /spring-AI. Simple as that. Go try it out. Unified interface for large language models. It's early days. We want your feedback. This is like, it's in the name, experimental, right?
And so it's buzzword compliant.
Yeah.
And I only found out about it about 2 or 3 days ago. I saw that there's a talk, I guess, tomorrow afternoon on that. And I was wondering what it was. And I didn't even realize there was a project until a few days ago. And I was telling Josh before this started, I went from being sort of an AI skeptic to being, I kind of see how that works now. I kind of see what the big buzz is in just the last week or so. And so it's kind of exciting to see that there's a Spring project for it.
Yeah, well, of course there is, right? I mean, it's I had that same experience years ago, and I was there you go. Okay, so I'm gonna put this on the screen for everybody. There it is. Go check it out. We want you to try it out. Just let us know if it works for you. If there's some use case you want better served, if there's something we're missing. It's open season. Hey, open season, spring. Never mind. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so you were talking about being a skeptic. I was having that same I think I had basically the same arc with social media as you
Mhm.
just did with AI. And I was like, oh, I think I really need to start learning how to program this. And then like a minute later, you announced Spring Social.
Yeah, that was in 2010. That was a long time
We
ago.
don't say things before COVID. That's you have to say 2010 BC.
Okay,
Yeah.
before COVID, 2010 BC. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, way too long.
And the whole goal of that project, largely, it took a weird form. The whole point of it was more. In fact, I think the name Spring Social is perhaps not a good name for it.
Yeah.
It sounded like something where we're going to have some tea and some crumpets. But it actually was, and people are going to dress, and they're like dapper as clothes they can find.
Yeah.
But it seemed to me that the core of the project was more about connecting Spring applications with any OAuth 2 or just OAuth 1, but mostly OAuth 2 as a client to any OAuth 2 secured API.
Right.
But at that time, some of the more popular, well-known ones were the social ones like Facebook, and Twitter was OAuth 1, but Facebook and LinkedIn. And so we provided some API bindings for those, and that's what actually became the popular thing, is the API bindings, not so
Those
much
are
the
so
OAuth
good.
connection.
Well, the OAuth connections are great, and I actually even when you decommissioned Spring Social some years ago, you wrote this great blog showing how to basically get OAuth hooked into with regular REST template and all that. It's like,
and Spring template, and,
yeah,
or not Spring template. I'm sorry, with Spring Security and REST template. And
yeah.
So you could. That's the other thing is Spring Security evolved over time, and its OAuth support evolved to the point where Spring Security, from a OAuth 2 connection standpoint, really was superfluous. We didn't really need it anymore.
Yeah.
Of course, what are you missing? You're missing the API bindings, which were
those are great,
the popular things, but those are such a challenge to manage, because Facebook would every 3 months would change their API, and that meant the API binding had to change. And then there's this wealth of an API binding that Facebook had, or Twitter or LinkedIn or anybody had, and any application didn't need all that. They only needed certain things. So it sort of made sense to retire that and let developers develop what they needed of their own API bindings, and then use Spring Security to make the connections. So Spring Social sort of outlived itself, and
I loved it. And Facebook changed. Facebook, like Hibernate, seems to break their API every other week, right? In point releases without warning. I remember there was it was just at some point people the community forced Facebook to, like, hey, you got to give us at least a few weeks before you break this thing. You can't just do it overnight, right? I don't know if it's a few weeks, maybe it was a few months. There had to be a cooling off period. You can't just it's broken. Good luck, fix it.
Well, I said every 3 months, and that was actually what they landed on. Initially, Facebook would change it overnight, just on a whim, and that was ugly.
Yeah, no, not good. So I love that. I love the bindings. On the other side of the spectrum, of course, was things that don't change at all. So I've been dealing with the Twitter API of late, and they still have half their API stuck in OAuth 1. You can't do everything you want to do in OAuth 2. So I can't even use Spring Security.
Right.
The OAuth stuff in Spring Security doesn't support OAuth 1.0 because why would it? It's ancient, decrepit,
problematic.
Technology. Yeah. So it was very, very painful. And that API, of course, things just broke. I mean, not related to the API proper, but just the tokens are all now associated with tiers, and a lot of that just broke overnight recently because Elon wants all the people that are consuming data to pay.
Wait, Twitter's changing?
Yeah, imagine. It wants people to pay something like that, $50,000 a month,
right,
or something. I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong number. It's just some crazy number. It's like, oh, clearly he does not want us to use that API. I get it now.
The good news is nobody can block me now.
Oh God. Okay, so there's that, and I love Spring Social. I actually built so we remember Project Glass from Google.
Yes.
It's
been a while.
Yeah, I got one of those, right? I was lucky enough to be, for whatever reason, I think it's just because I'm a San Francisco person with more than 2 followers on Twitter, right? Literally, I think it's probably that, because this was like 10, 11 years ago, right? It must have been. So Google invited me out to a barge, not a barge, like a little island off of it wasn't like a proper island, it was like maybe it was a pier or something, but you have to get to it by boat. That's the thing. It was weird. It was like a little area. Fake island kind of off the coast of San Francisco, off the Embarcadero there. So I met they said meet at the peer, and then so I'm like, who do I meet? And then of course there's this guy with a
It sounds shady.
good, yeah, exactly. There's a guy with a Google Glass. I'm like, oh, this guy. So then I met him, took me on a boat to this island, and they gave me the brand new Google Glass. Like I was one of the first 1,000 people in the world to have it. So the first thing I did with it, besides like look like an idiot for a minute, first thing I did with it was try and build a Spring Social binding.
Oh yeah,
yeah, I did. It was, and it worked. You can actually write. Well, I wouldn't use it now, of course. Apple VR is a new thing.
Does it even work now?
Yeah, exactly. Probably not, right? Like, that's very, very much a past thing. But yeah, Spring Social. That's how much I love that project. It was so useful.
And another example of that, Greg Turnquist, I think it was Greg who did this. He created a Spring Social binding for Ecobee thermostats.
Oh, that's so good.
Not social at all. I mean, nobody's going to subscribe and follow your thermostat settings, but
Right.
they use Spring Social for that.
That's exactly. That was a great project, and it just solved sort of day-to-day, like, because it is painful. Like keeping on top of all this and making it work idiomatically in a Spring project. It's hard now, even for the you were maintaining clients for all these different APIs.
We were ambitious at the beginning, and we scaled back because it became just unmanageable. Even with the one or two that we ended up landing on, it became unmanageable. We started with several.
Yeah, I remember. Anyway, very valiant, amazing effort. You also worked on, well, like I said, you've got these. So you had Spring. Let's talk about the books for a second, because I didn't want to give that. I want to give that more credit. It changed the world. It's one of the most popular books ever written on Spring. It is, and you've got several books. You also did one on modules, right?
Yes, that was a long time ago. Basically an OSGI book. Back modules before modules were cool.
Yep. And that was a great one. And then you did one on Spring Boot. You did Spring, and then that got merged into Spring in Action, I guess.
Yes. What happened is Spring in Action, 4, I guess, at the time. I think that was the edition we were talking about, maybe 5, I forget. Yeah. Spring Boot came along at the same time that book was finishing up. And so I didn't have time to really just stop the presses other than to throw in oh yeah, by the way, there's this thing called Spring Boot chapter at the very end. And then the publisher came along and said, well, what if we wanted to cover Spring Boot in more detail? And so we created a dedicated Spring Boot book. But then going forward, I didn't want to, I'm still, even to this day, I'm asking, is there ever going to be a Spring Boot in Action second edition? I'm like, no, never. Yeah. And the reason is that was just there to kind of fill a gap. And then now going forward, any edition of Spring in Action is going to be very boot centric from the get-go.
Right. Yeah. Because it's weird to consume Spring apps and
Spring Boot. Why would you want to?
Yeah. I mean, you could, and actually so we talked about that today. This SpringOne, we're celebrating 20 years of the thing called Spring, right? Spring Framework initially, but then that flowered, it bloomed into so many other Spring asterisk projects, I
like your flowers and blooms and spring. That's nice choice of words.
Hey, that was a happy accident. Thank you, sir. And then 10 years of Spring Boot.
Right.
So it's actually 20 years since the first announcement of the thing that would then become Spring Framework 1.0. We called it Spring Framework, but it wasn't 1.0 yet. And it's 10 years since the announcement of Spring Boot 1.0, but it wasn't 1.0 yet. It would 0.04 or whatever, right?
Something like that.
Yeah. So 2003 and 2013, but they were both GA in 2004 and 2014, respectively. And your book has been there for, when did you start writing that first book? I mean, most of that history, I think, is tied inextricably to that.
I became aware of Spring and started tinkering with it thanks to my first co-author, Ryan Breidenbach. Yeah. He introduced me to Spring when it was like 0.9, and I had just finished up writing another book on Xdoclet. Everybody remember Xdoclet?
I do, and I've talked about it, and I used EJB Doclet, and then it became the generic Xdoclet.
Right.
And if you didn't have annotations, that's what you used.
Yeah, and it did its job.
Yeah.
I mean, for what you had to work with, it did a good job. But
yes, it did.
I just finished up that book, and I was talking to my publisher. They were saying, can you recommend any other topics that we might want to publish books on? I said, well, there's this thing called Spring. It looks really cool. And they said, okay, who would you recommend to write that? And so I started listing off the obvious names. Yeah. And they said, okay. They came back to me and said, yeah, we talked to them and they don't want to write that book. Do you know anybody else? I'm like, I honestly can't think of anybody. They said, well, would you be interested? And that's when I said, well, maybe. And I chatted with Ryan, and we ended up writing the first edition of Spring in Action. So it was, I think that was published in 2004, if I remember right. 2005, maybe. It was like really quickly.
After the first one. That is phenomenal. Yeah, and you know, it's a cultural phenomenon. I mean, everybody's got that book. Everybody. You know, I've got multiple versions of the book. I even have the Spring Boot in Action one. You know, I've never got you to sign it because I'm lazy and I always forget to bring it. But my nightmare is that you're gonna like.
Well, if you have it in your Kindle, I'll sign your Kindle.
Yeah, I should. I wouldn't mind having you sign that. That'd be cool. Okay, so great book. I mean, I cannot.
Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Is I guess what I'm trying to say is so that I don't want to dismiss that. It's a huge thing. You joined in 2010, I think.
That's right.
I remember you joined a few months before I did, and I was like, oh, I wanted the job bad, but then I was like, oh, I really want to be able to work there. You know, I want the job even more if he's going to be there. So, and then you worked with, and that was, I think, the Keith influence is hard to. He, you know, This Week in Spring is because of him, right? He's the one who's like, hey, we should do a weekly thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
all coming down.
Oh yeah, exactly. And then of course the Spring Social stuff.
Right.
Even the API design, you can very much see the original sort of structure, very much a Keith-ism. And then what? I mean, you've been working on so much other stuff.
I spent a little time kind of delving into the different types of JavaScript frameworks and, you know, what Spring could offer to those things. And that was an interesting experience. Never went very far, but, you know, it was a good thing to fail on. It was a fun thing to fail on. And then I was part of the small team that worked with Chris Beams to create some of the initial content for Spring.io. And some of those getting started guides, even some of the ones that are out there even today, still have my words in them. They just
the rest.
I remember the rest one. Yeah,
I wrote one of the first ones. You wrote more of the first ones, and I remember the rest one in particular. That's the one you wrote.
Yeah, every so often I go out and look to see how much it's changed, and aside from, you know, occasional just, you know, updates and stuff, the text of it's more or less the same.
Yeah.
So you did that, and then ended up going to the commercial side and doing some of the work for Spring Cloud Services,
right,
and stuff that's available on what's now known as Tanzu Application Service for doing configuration, service registry, and then at least initially, what was it? The
Eureka.
Well, there's Eureka for service registry, config server. No, the totally blanking on what it's called. The circuit breaker stuff.
Oh, Hystrix.
Hystrix, that's right. Sorry. Hystrix. I'm picturing a porcupine in my head, and yet I couldn't think of the name Hystrix. But yeah, the circuit breaker stuff. And so was on that team. In fact, I'm still essentially on the team that supports that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we've been, in more recent years, been doing some more Kubernetes stuff. And I am now pretty much, there's this thing called Application Configuration Service, or ACS. It's available on both Tanzu Application Platform as well as Azure Spring Apps Enterprise. And I basically, you know, pretty much wrote every line of code that was in that initially. We've had some more team members that came along since then who have contributed, of course, and they've done some great work. But that was sort of the thing that I produced, and still working on. Still kind of proud of. It's kind of fun. The idea being that it's kind of like the idea of config server is you have an HTTP server that's listening on a port to provide you with configuration from some backend such as Git. ACS is similar to that. The difference is, instead of having a live HTTP server that the application asks for every time it starts up or a new instance spins up, instead, ACS is actually kind of lazy in this way, in that it still hits the get back in using the same conventions that you would have if you were using config server. So if you want to transition from config server to ACS, your backend doesn't have to change. Your Git doesn't have to change at all. Mm-hmm. And we pick it up and we spit it out into a Kubernetes cluster as either a secret or a config map, or both, depending on how you set it up. And then your application can just mount that and bind to it and use that configuration.
Oh, okay. So it's revending.
Exactly. And so what happens is, as opposed to config server, where every time you spin up an app, config server is going to get hit, which means the Git's going to get hit. And you have to deal with all the latency and potential for bringing down a Git repository. We had some customers who were using their own GitLabs internally, and they were spinning up, you know, thousands and thousands of applications almost simultaneously, and their GitLab went down the drain. It just couldn't handle that much load because those applications are just slamming it with a request for configuration. With ACS, we only hit it once.
Yeah.
To bootstrap it, and then to refresh later on.
That was my question. So if I want to use the refresh scope, with config maps, I can update them, but like with Spring Cloud Kubernetes,
Mhm.
there's a mechanism there to refresh the config maps and the secrets
Right.
and all that. Does this rely on does this mechanism for refresh? Well, first of all, let's say I change the Git repository. Do you automatically then revend
Mhm.
the config map, and then do I use Spring Cloud Kubernetes to see that updated one, or do you have a
No,
different
you don't have to use
mechanism?
Spring Cloud Kubernetes. In fact, your application doesn't even have to have a dedicated client library at all.
Oh,
There's
nice.
nothing special about it at all from the application side.
But is it just for environment variables? You'd have to restart the process, though, right?
We do, yeah. I mean, what
But
happens is it gets mounted onto the file system
config
and
tree. Okay.
as a config tree, or you could do it even as a flat application.properties. There's a strategy
Right.
for doing that as well, and it loads that up into the Spring application environment. Now, if something does change, if Git changes, then we also we can check on that at different intervals. By default, it's 60 seconds, but
Right.
every 60 seconds, we'll see if something's changed, and if it has, we'll pull it. We'll make a brand new config mapper secret,
So
and then your application, depending on whether you used, depending on the kind of config mapper secret, whether or not it's immutable or not, we will either overwrite the existing secret if it's mutable,
Right.
or we'll replace it if it's not. And then your application finds out about it. And if it's a mutable secret, then of course you're going to have to tell your binding. Now in TAP, that sort of happens magically behind the scenes. You don't even need to know about it, because in TAP, if a new secret shows up, then the TAP workload detects, oh yeah, there's a new secret. Let's
Right.
swap that out and redeploy the app.
Right.
If it's in ASA, then it's a mutable secret, and the application's file system gets refreshed, but then you still have to go tell the Spring application.
Acronym alert. What is TAP?
Oh, TAP, Tanzu Application Platform.
And what is that?
That is I don't want to misrepresent it, because I'm not on that team.
Yeah.
But it's basically the application platform built on top of Kubernetes for all sorts of things, but
Right.
of course, Spring apps.
Yep. Great ideal place for Spring apps. What is ASE? ASAE.
Azure Spring Applications, ASAE, is Azure Spring Applications Enterprise.
Right. You mentioned the trinity of the Spring Cloud infrastructure services earlier. You mentioned the Eureka, the config server, and what's the third one? Hystrix.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Hystrix is sort of gone now.
Yeah. It was a very good looking
Gateway came and sort of filled its spot.
Right. But there was a very cool looking page there with, you could see the spikes and all that. Anyway, all that stuff. That we've just integrated that with everything. If you want to use those bits, hardened and integrated with federated OAuth, IDP, organizational IDPs, we have those bits available for Cloud Foundry, which is TAS, Tanzu Application Service, which is Cloud Foundry++. We have it available for ASA. We have the open source for ASA. We have the hardened integrated one for ASAE.
That's right.
And then of course TAP. So this ACS, is that going to be applied? Is that available to all those? Well, Cloud Foundry, guess not, but
it's not going to be in TAS, but it is available for TAP and ASAE.
Cool. Oh, that's so cool.
In fact, it first started its life in ASAE.
Are we allowed to talk about this?
I don't see why not.
Is it out?
Oh yeah, it's been around for, I think, I was a little surprised in the keynote this morning. Somebody said it had been an ASAE since 2019. I guess I didn't realize it had been out there that long.
ACS?
Well, ASA, they said ASAE did. To me, that still seems like a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's been at least 2 years though.
Yeah. What about ACS?
Well, ACS was the first component of ASAE.
Oh, okay. So it's definitely been out there for a minute or two.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the 2019 was actually an accurate number, at least not for ASAE. That seems wrong, but
I think it was during the pandemic. But either way,
it's been at least 2 years, because I know some of the first iterations of it happened before the team formed. I was both the team lead, the project lead, the lead developer, the subordinate developer. I was everybody on the team for a brief period of time. And some of the folks now that are now on the team have been with us for over 2 years. So it's been at least 2 years.
Wow, that's cool. So that's amazing. That's really cool stuff. And you've got a real knack for, I know you were doing a lot of the federated IDP stuff as well earlier on, right? And then those other pieces. That kind of plays well with your experience with Spring Social. And you're also really good at building client APIs. And so it wasn't very surprising, given all of that and your experience with JavaScript and so on, that you also got really good. You got really into I don't know what is the archetype of an Alexa
Oh, the skill,
skills,
an Alexa skill.
but also you do a lot of those. It's not just that Alexa, right? You do
Well, voice applications in
That.
general, I'm interested in.
yeah.
And the world of voice applications is pretty broad. It covers a lot of different things. But clearly, kind of the most
Actually,
the
your
bigger
hat.
yeah, my hat is from last year's Alexa Live. Every year they have some sort of like virtual conference of sorts. It's a day long, and this is the hat from last year's Alexa Live.
It is a little jarring to think that the robotic voice that responds to me would have an event called Live.
Yes. Why? Well, you don't think she's alive?
Uh,
Anyhow, but yeah, Alexa is definitely one of the kind of the most well-known of these voice
Oh, sure.
platforms by far.
it is the AWS of
Yes,
voice apps. Yeah. Okay.
by far. And like even like Siri, bless her heart. I like Siri. She's great for setting timers, but beyond that, and she can make jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
Siri as a technology is pretty cool, but from a developer standpoint, it's lacking.
Yeah.
And Google sort of all but abandoned Google Assistant. And so from a developer standpoint, at least for the mass market, if you want to reach people, it's going to be Alexa right now.
Right.
Unfortunately, I wish I could say more, because I don't have any like hard and fast. I'm not invested. I don't get a dime from promoting Alexa, honestly.
Right.
But I wish I could say more. There are other platforms, but they're just not as well known. In fact, I've written a Spring app
Right.
that you can talk to in your browser. It doesn't involve Alexa at
Right.
all. The closest thing it involves is Lex, Amazon Lex behind the scenes. But even then, that the Lex part is pluggable, so it could have been something else.
Yeah.
And I just did that for natural language understanding purposes. But I have written a Spring app that I can talk to in my browser.
Wow. And now we take that and we pair it with Spring AI.
Yeah.
Got some really interesting opportunities here.
Right. And I'm intrigued by this because I really think there's some really cool stuff you can do now that I've started to get my eyes opened about some of what you can do with AI.
Right.
Putting OpenAI behind an Alexa skill so
Yeah.
that you're talking to Alexa. It's sort of from an Alexa developer's point of view, the OpenAI takes away some of the natural language processing. You sort of like defer that off to OpenAI to handle that for you now, as opposed to your skilled handling it. Not that it's hard in your skill, but now you just shove that off over to that.
Just pass the question onward.
And so that's kind of nice. And then from a OpenAI, or I keep saying OpenAI. It's not the only option out there. That's just the one I think about the most.
Sure. Don't blame. It is. You might say the Alexa.
Yeah. Yes, you might say that.
Of LLMs.
But at least from that perspective, if you're interested in OpenAI or any of the LLMs, Alexa is what is going to give those a voice as opposed to just typing at it.
Right. Yeah. This is gonna be awesome. Okay. So do you have anything? Do you have any particular skills people can try or is there anything?
Let's see. I have a few, but the one that I spend most of my time on.
Yeah.
And I say most of my time, it's like literally after hours, weekends, whenever, the family's already in bed and I can't sleep.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things. I have a skill called mouse guests. It's mouse as in Mickey Mouse and guests as in you are a guest of a location. And what mouse guest does is allows you to, whether you're in Disney World, Disneyland, it doesn't matter. You can use it at home, and you can ask it things like park hours and what the current wait time is for attractions. And then there's some other fun stuff it does. And if you're actually in the park, which is kind of cool, it's a location-based skill. So if you're actually in the park and you have granted access to your location and you're using your phone, or I have this really cool thing on the back of my phone called a talk socket, which is essentially a smart microphone, and I can talk to Alexa through it. You can ask it things like, where can I get a churro? And based on your location, it'll guide you to the nearest churro. And
Wow.
That's kind of fun.
So you have Alexa on your iPhone.
I do.
That's amazing.
In fact, if anybody owns an Alexa device, they probably have Alexa on their iPhone, because the other thing, even if I didn't have that device, there's this little icon up in the corner. That's the Alexa widget. I can just tap that and talk to it as well.
And that skill works there as well?
Mhm.
Oh, that's awesome. So anybody can install it, or is it just
Oh, yeah.
yours? Okay.
All you have to do is say, like, Alexa, open mouse guests, or Alexa, ask mouse guests, what time does Epcot open tomorrow? Things like that, and it'll work.
You're such a smart guy, and so I try not to bother you too much for spring questions. But I I took the family to Disneyland, and you've got this endearing knowledge and affinity for all things.
I know
Disney.
a few things.
Oh, sir, understatement of the decade. Yeah, you know, like I know your spring knowledge is the bulk of, but there's this huge chunk of Disney stuff as well, and I cannot believe like you were like my tour guide when I was in the park. I was asking you questions all the time, and it's just like, oh, this is so cool. I didn't know you were.
And I was Disneying vicariously through you at the time.
So good. I had so much fun. That is a lot of fun, and thank you for that. I mean, so I guess the next best thing is if you don't have his phone number, is to get the mouse guests. There's a lot of great advice there.
And I'll be honest with you, mouse guests. It sounded like a clever name when I first came up with it, but it turns out that with voice apps, to say the word mouse guests, it gets easily misunderstood, depending on how clearly you say it, how clearly you enunciate, maybe if you have an accent. And so more often than not, it actually opens mouse gas, whatever that is. And so I am considering a branding change just because I need to come up with something that's more easily understood.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But when that happens, I'm sure the old mouse guest skill will tell you what the new one is. So.
Yeah, that's like when we named Spring Cloud Sleuth.
Yeah.
Sleuth is a very hard word for a huge chunk of the population on the planet to pronounce.
And there's 2 ways to spell it, at least.
Oh, really? I know.
Yeah, it depends on where you put the E and the U. You have to stop and think about it.
Oh.
And I know what the right way is, but
what's the right way? I always do
E before the U.
I do that one. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I've seen people type it the other way, not because they don't know how to type well or they just don't know, and that's fine.
Well, that's okay. I didn't know. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I like Spring Cloud Sleuth, but there's a lot of reasons why I'm glad it's been pushed down into micrometer.
Yeah.
One of them is
that's nice.
I don't have to pronounce the word sleuth anymore, and then poor people have to, how hard it is to ask questions.
Sounds like we got a kind of a lisp.
Yeah, sleuth. It's a very weird sound. Anyway, okay, so we have some questions. Speaking of questions, before we move on, before we get the Merry Marching Band, as Stanley would have said, the Merry Marvel Marching Band. Before that keeps marching, let's see what we got here. Hi from South Africa. Great, we saw that. Hi from Belgium. Yes. Spring AI, it sounds cool. You're right, it does. We're all super excited. You can sense it.
I have no idea what it's going to do because I haven't touched it yet.
Yeah.
That's on my to-do list.
Our friend Simon says, any idea if there are any plans for something a tad more LAO? Oh, I guess he meant elegant. And he says, question, any plans for, he repeated the question. Any plans for slightly more elegant way to create declarative REST clients than this? And, I have, yes. Yes, I know I've been working on that, and I know smarter people than I have taken that code, and who knows,
Are we talking about the new declarative stuff and how to make it even better? Because I'll say I like it. I like it a lot, but there is a little bit of boilerplate.
It is boilerplate. Yeah, this is the new boilerplate. This is not even the web client adapter that I've been doing in every demo for the last year or whatever. But still, yeah, it could be better, and it's gonna be. Don't worry, I have every confidence that it'll get better. If not, if for no other reason than because I have written the code to make it better, and if they don't accept that, then something will get accepted. And it works in native too. That's the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and I agree 100%. Lovely to not have to drag in web client or use the verbose REST template anymore. By the way, the new REST client is hot sauce. Good stuff.
Yeah, I love it.
And then we saw that in the keynote this morning. There's a great discussion around the REST client and the JDBC client, right? From Jürgen, and then we talked about actually the best, the one. I mean, I knew these things conceptually, but just to see it so well articulated, so clearly articulated, Cora's discussion of virtual threads.
Oh yeah,
fantastic.
It was amazing, and I've played around with virtual threads in Spring. Quite a bit. In fact, I even did a talk not too long ago at one of the conferences I was at.
No Fluff Just Stuff.
Yeah, it's one of the No Fluff Just Stuff shows, and I showed it off.
He's a frequent, he's an institutional speaker at No Fluff Just Stuff, one of the best shows in the business, and he's there more often than not. You've got to go. If you're in the States, you should go see these shows.
Aside from Venkat, I am the longest running speaker on the tour. And there for a while, I thought I was going to be the longest running because Venkat took about a year off, but then he came back to it. So
That's well.
But yeah, I did do a demo, a brief demo of the virtual thread stuff about a month ago, I guess, and it went well.
Yeah.
But it was just a quick one. It was just a quick hit, like just,
Right.
oh yeah, by the way, you can do this. And I was still, I think what Cora did this morning was amazing. It basically was the more expanded version of what I did.
And part of that is that in order for that to work, that requires Java 21, which is coming out in less than a month. It just occurred to me. The last date I've seen was September 19th. I don't know if that's right. I have no idea.
I never know. I usually don't know until it happens.
But it's last night. If it's September 19th, it just occurred to me we're in 21 August already.
Mm-hmm.
So we are less than a month away from Java 21, which has Project Loom or virtual threads, which is free money. It's just upgrade and you get scalability and then you get concurrency. And another thing that we just talked about at the keynote today, we saw Cora's talk, and again, you've got to watch it. And to the question, by the way, there is a question there. There is a question. The question is, I really want to watch SpringOne. Is there any affordable way for me as a student to watch it? And I mean, I don't know actually, but I know previous years we've always posted these videos on YouTube.
I've heard that they're going to show up within 24 hours of their presentation, but I don't know that. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah,
things I hear
from other speakers, perhaps, or something. I don't know. I don't know. But previous years we've always posted them online, so I wouldn't be, I'd be shocked if we didn't. But nobody tells us anything. We just work here. Like, hi from West Africa. Hi, which part of West Africa? Like Cote d'Ivoire, or Sierra Leone, or I mean, all these places. Good stuff. Nice to see you. Welcome. There are no virtual tickets this year, but one can watch it on YouTube in a few weeks, months. Yeah, that's some version of that is the truth, right? It'll be on YouTube, I suspect. English, yeah. Oh, Simon says that the skill rollout for Alexa it's been limited, at least in Belgium.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, I mean, every so often somebody talks about this with the Alexa team. I join a virtual, I guess office hours every Tuesday morning. Unfortunately, I won't be able to tomorrow because I'm going to be tuning into a keynote for SpringOne. But during the office hours, a lot of times people ask about, when is Alexa going to be more available in my country and in my language and locale? And the answer, that kind of the canned answer, is we would like it to be available for every language and in every locale. However, there's a lot that goes into each one of those, not just from the technical aspects of it, but also some legal aspects. And so it's slow, unfortunately, to get them into all these different locales.
Absolutely. Speaking, so let me see. How do you see the increase of AI and voice interactions in cars in the next 1 or 2 years?
Let's see. I don't know. I mean, quite honestly, anything I come up with in reason on what it might be is probably going to be vastly inferior to what will really happen. I would hope that, I mean, we're already seeing now self-driving cars, and I have some, quite honestly, some skepticism around self-driving cars. I know that they exist, and I know people are finding some value in them. I don't know yet that the self-driving car has successfully satisfied my concern with the deer running across the road scenario. But because where I live, I literally, as a human, I can't deal with deer running across the road. I don't know that AI is going to necessarily be able to handle that. It'll handle it maybe faster, but maybe not as well. And but I don't know, maybe we'll see. But I would actually wouldn't mind. I'm still skeptical of it, but I wouldn't mind the scenario where I don't have to drive, because I honestly hate driving.
Me too.
I like getting places, but I don't like driving there. And so that would be nice to see that. Now, honestly, I would love to see more train ways to get there. You get on a train and get places, and that's just in the United States. That's just not a reality, unfortunately. But
so I'm with you. I have a Tesla, and don't at me. I didn't know the guy was crazy when I bought the car.
You're forgiven.
But the full self-driving is pretty good, but huge but Mercedes is better. And so did you hear recently they have level 3 autonomy in Mercedes now? In California and in Germany, you can buy a Mercedes and you are legally allowed to turn it if you engage level 3 autonomy and something happens. But you have to, it doesn't do that all the time. You have to engage it. But if you engage that feature, and then it's engaged, and if the car says it's engaged, you can read a book. If something happens, Mercedes gets the bill. They're culpable, not you.
I have not heard that, but that's
In California
that's
and in
interesting.
Germany. Well, it's one thing in America, but Germany, like they don't just
In
yeah.
California, I mean,
Yeah.
California is pretty
Well,
strict on a lot of things too.
Well, I mean, it's still America, right? But Germany, I mean, just really amazing capabilities there. But I do think we're going to get a chat GPT moment. That arc that you just described of like getting to the point where you're like persuaded that the AI can kind of reason almost, where you suddenly have that epiphany, like, oh, this is actually as close as it needs to be useful, right? It's not truly sentient, okay, but at some point faking it might be enough, and
I mean, that is why it's called artificial intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. And there's these sort of these self-driving cars, like the full self-driving in the Tesla now. I can't read a book. I can't like disengage from I have to be actively babysitting the car, which is fine, right? But it is possible for me to get in the car, hit the button, and have it take me out of my garage, down into the street, across town, and then I pull into the garage of the other place without having to do a single thing. Yeah, and sometimes I have to intervene. Sometimes it does really goofy things, that are like, oh, that's just wrong. That was dangerous. You could have gotten, nothing went wrong, but that was wrong. And so it's still, if it does that once,
Yeah.
And so you've got to keep right now, we're not at the point where I'm just like, I'm confident in it, but it is so close that I can see it,
Well, my youngest daughter is learning to drive right now. And honestly, I got to think that the self-driving cars are better than she is, because I can't disengage when she's driving either. It scares the snot out of me.
So your youngest daughter, right? So my only daughter, she's just turned 18. Funny you should mention this, right? Because we were in my partner and my kid and I were in Asia for a few months, and we just got back on the 8th of this month. And automatic. Is your kid driving stick or automatic?
Automatic. There is no way I'm putting her in a stick.
I learned the stick for a minute. That's my first car. I had a 1984 Honda Civic, but I learned to drive in '98. It was a used car, right? But still, I couldn't do it now. Anyway, my kid, it's been such a roller coaster. We got back on the 8th. Since then, as she's now an adult, she's 18. She's 18. That's the thing to say, right? But she's legally allowed to fly by herself. So proud. So she went to the airport by herself and got all the way down to LA without a parent anywhere involved, right?
Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, we bought the tickets and all that. Obviously we're in touch with her the entire time, but there's that. And then she passed her driver's license test, and we've had her in training. We've gotten like tutors, like an instructor, driving instructor, much more driving behind the wheel than the legal requirement of like whatever, it's like 50 hours, whatever, if you're not 18, right? We've done much more every weekend for like the last 8 months. She's been driving hours and hours and hours, right? Really just wanted to make sure she had every bit of exposure to driving. And San Francisco is not a chill city to drive in. No. So I knew she was getting good, and the instructors had glowing reports. I'll get in the car with her, but I don't want to, even if I don't say anything, body language says a lot. So if I'm sitting there bracing like, oh God, it's just not good for her, right? So I've just sort of like, okay, you go with instructor. That's why we pay them. They have a break in the wheel well to make sure everything's okay. So I know she's driving well. I've got nothing but glowing reports from the instructor, but I haven't really had a chance to like see it. So then she took the driving test like a week and a half ago, passed, right? And then we went to car shopping, and that's the first time I got to see her. So I'm in the back seat of all these cars. And it got to the point where I'm like checking my phone, and I'm just chatting on Twitter. I'm like, oh, hey, I'm not even worried about it. She's doing great up there. Good job. Like it happens. It is terrifying, and then it's not.
That was the experience we had with my oldest daughter. She picked it up really quick, and to the point where I was, doing other things. My youngest, I think part of her problem is that she's nervous, and we're nervous because she's nervous, and
it makes it bad for everybody.
It just snowballs. And but she's getting better.
Yeah, of course. They I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. My kid is smarter than I am. So if I can drive a car, then she can definitely do it, Okay, so Somebody says, and this is always worth remembering, there was a robotaxi that collided with a fire truck in San Francisco last Thursday. Yeah, there are lots of examples of robo cars. Because remember, in San Francisco, we have full autonomous vehicles that drive at nighttime.
I've heard of this.
Yeah. And they even, that you can get a car. It's like Uber. You can, on your phone, you can request a ride with these driverless cars. You see them all around the city in San Francisco. So it's not, and so it's not perfect. There are sometimes going to be issues. The thing to remember is that for every one autonomous driver as a percentage of the fleet that's out there, there's what, how many thousands of people, regular people driving that get into accidents. And it's not just an empirical number, it's a percentage of people with regular cars. They're getting into a lot more accidents. That's why the governments all around the world are moving to allow hesitantly these automatic robo taxi things.
And I think the problem I have mentally with it is I sit back and I think about it and I reason that self-driving cars are probably driving better than the vast majority of the human-driven cars out there, because most of the humans out there suck at driving.
The worst. Me too. I'm not good.
But I'm expecting it to be better than that. Yeah. I'm expecting it to be, to make it where it's, because I'm a very conscious driver, and I want it to be better than me. And I think that's where I have my hesitation, is I'm expecting more of it than I'm expecting of the other drivers on the road.
Yeah, I don't drive for myself. I drive for everybody else on the road, which, by the way, changes what, like, I think, software. What does a mature engineer look like? It's somebody who can work well with others. It's not just coding by yourself, lone cowboy or is it cowgirl? I don't know. What's the right thing? The lone hero. That's better.
Maverick.
Yeah. Lone maverick coders. That's not the sign of a more senior engineer, right? If you can't play with others, nobody wants to work with you, right? That's a disservice. So, and the same thing as I've gotten older. First of all, I wobble more. I get up sometimes. I'm like, oh, hey, that foot isn't going where I thought it would go. So I guess I must be.
I'm older than you. Wait, wait, it gets better.
And then empirically, I must be slower on the draw, right? I mean, I don't imagine my reflexes are nearly what they were even just 20 years ago. And so I know when I drive now, I don't know, I don't drive as fast as I used to. I used to be. I'm from LA too. We drive like crazy people there, cut you for a car length, right? Like
right.
But I've just become sort of like grandpa, and my kid, I'm sure she hates driving with me because I'm piddling down the road, so okay, even somebody says a great point. Even AI cars can't prevent crazy drivers on the road. Exactly. There's going to always be that entropy.
The biggest problem with it is that there's still humans out there, and most of them suck at driving.
Let's see. Oh, hey, hi everybody. Well, yeah, okay, good. So people are, I don't know. I don't know where to point people when they listen to this episode. I want them. Normally I hope people will just give me a few places where they can find you. Well, first of all, are you on the internet? That's my normal question.
I mean, the easiest way to find anything about me, whether you want to follow me on the social medias, or you want to find my books, or you want to watch any videos, because I produce videos both on Spring and Alexa development. Not as many as I'd like to. I wish I had more time to do that.
They're really good.
But if you want to find any of that stuff, the best place to find me is at habuma.com. HABUMA.com.
Okay.
That's short for Harley, Buster, and Max, which were the 3 dogs that I had when I needed a domain name. They've all moved on to other things now, mostly because they died. But
farm upstate, I like to say. Okay, come on.
Yeah, they went to a farm.
Yeah.
But Harley, Buster, and Max were the 3 dogs we had.
All these years, I've always kind of wondered. Harley, Buster, and Max. Is this the first time you've told anybody that?
No.
You could have just said yes and like.
Oh sure, it's never exclusive. Brought it. I just came up with it.
The coffee. By the way, as you and I were talking, during this interview, live, I've got an iPad here. I'm looking at questions over here. Twitter. As a part of our ongoing efforts to modernize and transform our API platform, we're deprecating some of our V1.1 endpoints and ask you to migrate to the V2 equivalent table below. While we are currently not replacing a few legacy endpoints, these deprecations will allow us to continue building to support the latest X features into our V2 APIs. We'll continue deprecating V1.1 endpoints in the future and highly suggest mapping out your existing consumption to prepare for future migrations. So that's from Twitter Dev, but it's talking about this platform called X, which is nothing confusing about that. So yeah, I was saying Twitter never changes.
Twitter always changes.
Yeah,
and at least lately.
Least convenient way, right? Too. Okay, well.
Yeah, X is that button you click at the top of your screen to close the window.
Yeah. Or X never changes. Yeah, it changes all the time now. Okay, so Habuma.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're on you're on X as at Habuma.
That's right.
There's a skill out there called Mouse Guests.
Yes.
That people can and should find. It might change its name, so get it now while it's still referenceable by that name. Your book, Spring in Action.
Spring in Action, 6th edition. It's been out for a little over a year now. And a little secret is I'm talking about a 7th one. Not much work has been done toward that, but I'm talking about it.
And it'll have virtual threads.
Oh, absolutely. That's it.
3.2, right?
It's absolutely going to be 3.2.
Yep.
Or whatever, if something else comes along before I finish it. The other book, Build Talking Apps for Alexa.
You've got a book on building skills and stuff?
Yes. And that one, I don't have any immediate plans for a 2nd edition, although I really want to, mostly because so much has happened since that book was printed. I don't recommend writing 2 books at the same time. That's what I did with Spring in Action 6 and that one.
And the modules when you were doing that with something else as well.
Yeah. And so I don't recommend that, but it happens. But yeah.
Make it look easy, my friend.
I do believe that the Alexa book, even though it's been out for a little over a year and since so much has happened, it's still relevant. Everything in there is still good.
Yeah.
It's just there's so much more I want to tell now.
No doubt. So Amazon or any fine e-tailer or retailer for books that will have it. Printed versions are, I've got a stack of them, so I know they're around as well. Anything else?
I got nothing.
You might have had one thing.
Okay.
SpringOne.io/history of Spring with dashes in between.
I have heard of this, and I heard you talking about it on the way here, but I've heard of it for the last few weeks, but I have not looked at it yet. I just haven't had a chance.
We're gonna look at it right after the show. Everybody, thank you for hanging out. Look at that. Oh, somebody says he got the book, 6th edition. Glad to interact with the author.
Well, thank you.
It's a great book. Yep, absolutely. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day. And stay tuned for more. I think we're doing another live stream very soon. So talk in a bit.